Okay, so figure drawing. I've picked out a Raphael figure drawing that I like. This is new. I've never drawn this one before, but I've drawn from Raphael before, and I like him. I like the way he handles things, and so drawing from his work always gives me something new to think about, a new way of rendering things. So um, when you begin, you're going to have to like pick out some materials. And I decided that I would use this Conte crayon, which is a pastel, kind of like charcoal, clay based, and that I just work on white paper. This isn't the greatest paper. But then I also brought for myself some brown colored pencils because I kind of like the brown tones that are there. A blending stump, although I'm not going to use this that much. I got myself a like soft paper towel, not like the brown ones, but a softer paper towel. And if worse comes to worse, I brought the old charcoal pencil, which was my best friend in college. And I'm looking at this, and I want to walk you through sort of how I think about doing a figure drawing if I'm drawing directly from observation. We could take this and put it on the projector like we did with the chiaroscuro and get our basic information and then get off the projector and do the detail work. There's no problem with that. When we do a new project, you can always use techniques that we used before. But for right now, I'm going to start the way that I've been taught to start drawing from life. This isn't a live model, but I would draw it the same way. Because I find that some of the techniques that I use drawing from life will help even when I have a static pose like this that I can come back to again and again and again, and the model will never shift and the time will never end. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of like tone this paper a little bit because I've got this white paper and I sort of like the fact that this has a little bit going on there. So with this Conte crayon, on its side, for me, look at that. I'm already getting kind of like some interesting things because of the texture of the table. And I might come back and just kind of like wipe that out because I don't want to get it all over my hand the whole time. Or even, use my blending stump just to get kind of a tone going there. But then after I kind of get a tone going, I can erase back into it too so that it's light. And I could even come back and say, hey, like up here, already I've got some stuff that I'm seeing up there. I might just want to put in there as like nonsensey sort of marks. Because that's one of the things that I want you to look at is like how the artist is handling the material, not just what the figure looks like, but how they touch with their materials. So I've got a little tone going now on my paper. And the first thing that I want to do when I'm doing a figure drawing is get the big ideas first. And that's what we call a gesture drawing. Sometimes that's all you have time for if somebody's standing and you want to sketch them really quickly and you know that they're going to move in a minute or so. This person will never move. But I would still do it because the benefit of drawing quickly and starting to get the big ideas in there will help me later. Sometimes you'll draw, say, like the head, and you'll spend a whole bunch of time on that. And then you get done with the head and you move on to something else and you draw something else and say you draw the hand and you get that looking really, really, really good. And then you realize that the head is way too big for the hand and you spent all this time and your figure doesn't have the right proportions. Well, if I start to see those proportions quickly, then when I come back and start doing details later, I know that I'm not wasting my time trying to get all these details right, but that I may have to like completely start over because the proportions are all wrong. So a gesture drawing, as my dad would describe it, is not how it looks, but what it's doing. So instead of drawing these sharp outlines about where things end, I might look at what's happening internally, almost like I'm thinking about a skeleton. What's inside this person and how is this person's shoulders shifting and where are their hips, what's happening with legs and that sort of thing. But also looking at like relationships, like the eye to the knee. I want to make sure the knee is like to the right of the eye, or the lean of this, the lean of that. So his recommendation to me was to think about maybe one or two things. If you were to draw one line that went from the head all the way to the toe, what would that line look like? And in this case, I might say, okay, it's kind of like that. I've got a line that sort of starts up here for the head, and then this whole pose kind of goes that way. Another thing I could think about is like, what kind of shape would this person fit into? And if I'm thinking about that, it's kind of like a rectangle, like I can even draw over here that's kind of like on its side. So if I give myself that kind of a shape, it might even start to help me figure out where things should begin and where things should end. But then I also want to like start thinking about breaking down some of the other parts that I'm seeing in here. So a single line, a single shape, not really enough. Um, so I might build up some marks like up here to see where that head is, and maybe think about something like a lean. So I'm putting in a line that's just kind of defining the fact that it's leaning this way. And then what's the shoulders doing? Like the shoulders, they're going across like that. Can I get that angle right? And I did more lines than I would typically do. Usually I'll just put down a couple of lines there. And if I emphasize the lines too much, then when I come back and start doing my details, I might not be able to get them in, or I may have to use other things like my eraser more than I want to. So you want to kind of put it down and then move on. So talking through this process is slowing me down. So I'm going to kind of like talk just a little bit, but I can kind of see something in here, and then this hand and arm are kind of going back over there, and then that shoulder's there. So my hand's kind of like in this general area with a whole bunch of like stuff kind of going on right in here. And then below the hand, it kind of skips, and I see this leg kind of coming down, and then the foot's kind of doing that sort of a thing there. And that's another one of those areas where I might say, okay, make sure that that knee's off to the right a little bit more. So I'm going to come in and kind of define that. I don't know. And then the other leg's tucking behind it over here. So I know that the hips are back in here. So this upper body, I can kind of put in almost like a bubble for like the upper body, and then the abdomen and lower body there. And then this arm is extending out like that. And there's my gesture drawing. We can get a little bit closer in so you can kind of see. It's not revealing everything. I haven't got into detail yet, but I'm getting the general idea. And before I move on and start slowing down and looking more closely, I want to get up, I want to look at it and see if what I'm seeing here feels like what I'm seeing here. If I don't do that, then I run that risk of ending up spending a lot of time on a hand, eye, a foot, and it being too big, the wrong shape. So that's my gesture. After I do that, I want to think about the structure next. I've got like this line starting to define this head that's in here, but now I'm looking more closely at things like, oh, the shoulder is actually touching the chin there. So I want to make sure that the shoulder is high enough. So I'm going to bring that line up a little bit there. Um, Her body's leaning this way, and if this is kind of where the shoulder would end, and this is where this shoulder would end, and I can put in things like circles for that, then what happens? Like it looks like the arm comes down and then starts coming out there. So I'm kind of figuring it out almost like I'm drawing a elaborate stick figure out of bubbles and making sure that everything feels right, that I don't have a shoulder in the middle of her chest, or that her hips, aren't right beneath her shoulder, that things feel like they're in the right spots. Once I do start to think, okay, yeah, this is going to kind of come down, like her hips are back in here and it's kind of like they're hidden and that sort of thing. And this would be where the knee would be. And then this would be kind of like where that leg's coming down, which means that this is pretty flat. And so this is going to come over, and that's where that knee is. And then this is going to come up, which means that her upper body is going to kind of do this. And then this arm's going to kind of come over here, end up here, and then start coming forward towards me, which means that her hands are going to hit right about in there. And everything sort of makes sense. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to really look and see what is happening. And what I'm noticing is like, here's a good place for me to start. I see like a little line here that looks like a Y shape on its side. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw a Y shape on its side. And I know that I'm getting a profile here, so I might just start thinking about locating that nose, and that this is that forehead, and then it comes up, and that then there are these little lines that start to make marks that indicate a hairline that's there. And then I'm looking closely here and I'm like, okay, well, how does this artist do this eye? And basically, if I get rid of some of these marks that are in here, because it's pretty clean in that general area, but I've got a little bit of tone here. And so some of that tone from the marks that I already made, I'm going to keep. And then I could come back and add just a little bit of Conte Crayon there, and then maybe even blend that a little bit. But I want to see some of those clean marks like Raphael. But I'm looking at the eye, and I know how I draw an eye, but I see here that it just looks like a Nike swoosh upside down almost. So over here, I'm not going to think too much about it. I'm just going to draw like a Nike swoosh upside down. Might be a little bit low. Let's move that up just a hair there. Yeah, just like that. That's all I'm going to do. And I've got back some more marks and then an ear developing there. And then I've got just a hint of a mark underneath it there. And then I've got this neck coming back. And I just have a few light indications of the back. But behind that ear, I've got a bunch of darker marks. I'm going to pull in some dark there. But up here, I'm just going to kind of leave it. And that's all it's going to be at this point. Then this line comes and extends down. Now that's not initially where I drew that shoulder, but I'm not going to worry about it. And then there's kind of like another little line that sends out like that. I'm going to erase a little bit there. And then this line comes well out. And if I look at it and check its angle, it's pretty straight. So it's lower than I've put it there. And then there are a few little marks here. And then I've got this neckline that comes from this shoulder over here, and I'm going to go ahead and put that in. And then I've got some shading over here and a few little just kind of like curly marks that kind of build up there. And I've got some more coming over this way, and it kind of lines up, but I'm not going to lean too heavy on there. And then in this general area, I'm going to move this down a little bit, and some of this history from what I've already done, like a little rectangle in there that I'm going to put in. I'm going to keep that. And then over here, I've got some more little marks that fill and some hatching, cross hatching, so I'm going to keep those. And then this is a big swoop that comes out with a few extra lines in there. And then there's like a little thing here. And we got some triangular marks going up in there, something that looks like it was erased into the space. So I'm going to put that in. And then here I got to lean again, get some darker marks going. And what I'm noticing already is that this hand needs to be a little further over this way. And then I skip. And then here I'm going to get like a little darker area for what looks like the first finger. I'm going to get that in there the way that I want. And then the second finger comes down a little further. And then he just does like a little mark for the other side of the hand, and it kind of comes up, goes like that. And then a little bit of hatching and cross hatching over here to define it. So I'm just doing a few little marks. I'm not drawing individual fingers so much. It just gets a little bit darker on the side. And there's a few little hatches in there, so I'll put that in. And checking the size, it's about the same size as my head, which is about right. So I'm going to keep that just like that. I'm noticing now that I didn't do lips, so I might as well do that again. They're just like a little teeny mark there, and a little mark underneath it. And this is where my Conte Crayon might be a little bit thick. So I might come in and say, okay, what if I used another material in that spot to start to define some of that stuff that's in there? You know, not stick with the big, heavy Conte Crayon mark, but pull in some of my colored pencil marks to define some of these shadows that I'm seeing in here and highlights that are coming out. All right, so I'm getting close. So this line continues through here. That hand might be a little bit big. This comes down. There's a few little sketch marks in there. Oh, good. This is where I started with that knee. It's a little bit lower than where I started it, but that's okay because it's going to kind of fit in here. And then afterwards, it goes like this, and it's got this little in-out lump. And then it's going to come in, and it's going to come down and this way. And then I'm going to get an ankle, and then it kind of comes out. Bet this is off the screen, but that's okay. I'm going to get the other side of this leg. I'm going to shorten this up a little bit. Feels like it's a little bit long, so get rid of that. It's going to come up underside of the knee and get that dark, and then a little bit of light, and then a couple more lines coming out from it like that, and a line that kind of shoots in like that. And then the knee itself is bright. This line should be a little bit softer. And there's a little bit of shading on this side and the top of the knee to make it feel like it's got that light hitting it. It's got a little bit of roundness to it. So now let's try that ankle again. It's here. It's going to be like here. It's coming down this way. We're going to make this like the toe. And it's just like a little dark area right there to define where that toe ends. There's a couple more little marks. And then he kind of defines it by doing a shadow that goes off into the negative space that starts to link up with that shadow. Then next to this, I'm going to have some dark here to define this other knee. Some lines that extend up just a little bit. And then it's like closer to the ankle than I've got it here. So I'm going to put in that line and look at it. Looks like a elephant's head or something like that. So I'm going to put that in. And it's going to be about the same width. So I'm going to pull that over and look at what kind of marks are up here. I've got this pretty good, but I got to pull these over a little bit. Maybe lighten up some of these areas in here. There's just a little indication of hand there. I feel like this hand is still too big. I think I might come back and rework that a little bit. But you're getting the idea, which is what I want. See a little bit of how this is built up and how that gesture doesn't affect what I've done after the gesture. So a little bit of erasing, a little bit of tone here. Why don't we use that blending stump one more time? And maybe in here just a bit, with the exception of a few things here and there. I could lighten up the shoulder. That's working pretty hard there already. I'm feeling pretty comfortable with that drawing. It feels to me like the head's a little bit too big, probably because I'm sitting and looking at it this way, but enough that I could kind of come back and make a few little adjustments, change it, or maybe even draw it a second time. Oh my gosh, do more than one drawing of the same thing? Yes. And that should be helpful to get you started. 20 minutes, not bad. Bye, guys.